Okay. All right. So the other thing I would love to do, we always start as you're putting in your name and your role, is to share, like do a check-in with each other. Sometimes I forget to slow down and check in, and I just want to go right to the work. Um, and just if you want to add in the chat how's the weather, how's your internal weather, your external weather, both. How are you doing today? We're going to talk a lot about um, the return to school today, and kind of process what people have been experiencing. So I'm curious to know how's your internal weather. Mine's been partly sunny with a chance of showers, I guess. I'm feeling a little worried.
Judith, meh.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of my favorites. Meh.
It is. It is.
Yeah, I think Emily and I put that in a poll for one of our conferences as a choice of how you could be feeling.
Totally. Mm.
Yep.
Sunny here, but there's a big storm on the horizon. Does she mean that metaphorically, or is that for real?
Both, right?
Well, I think that that's a sentiment that we are starting to hear from people. Hot human.
Human. Yeah, humidity. Wow, that's something I don't necessarily miss, but I do miss sometimes that evening humidity. In California, where I live, we don't have that. It's kind of chilly at night. Awesome.
Sherry, yeah. Sherry, I feel you. I don't know if you're, I don't see you. Oh, there you are, Sherry.
Yep.
Hey, Sherry. I'm feeling you right now.
Yeah, Emily and I were just saying, we even though she's in New Hampshire and I'm in Los Angeles, we work together pretty frequently, and I really miss working with her in person. It's makes me sad. Okay, so what came up for us this week was just really driven partly by the news, right? Everything that went on last week. Around the return to school, both from our administration and locally, the administration's perspective on returning to school and the push to be in person. And then locally around me, all of a sudden in the last 2 days, all of the districts, the big districts around Los Angeles have released their plans. And almost all of them plan to return remotely now, because our caseload's so high, and they're going to reassess by October whether they can go to a hybrid model. But it kind of like Pasadena, Long Beach, Los Angeles, San Diego, like all of a sudden just kind of like dominoes in the last couple of days. And I know just from listening to my own district where my kids go, it's been changing daily. Like at first they were like, we're going back hybrid 100%, be ready. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. But that was when things were lower. And now, they said they're just operating on like 1 week chunks, which I really feel for them as administrators, and they've been really great about being super transparent about that, which I think builds a lot of trust with us as the parents. I can see the process that they're trying to go through, and know that they're making the best decision. And so then all of a sudden, they also changed to, we're going back 100% remote. And so I feel, and I know so many educators, as both friends and colleagues, that are extremely worried about their own safety and the people in their building, bus drivers, janitors, principals, teachers, people over 50, people with underlying conditions, people that have vulnerable folks at home, right? There's all of these concerns and anxiety about their own personal safety, not to mention the safety of the kids. And people are wrestling, with the inequities that occur with kids learning from home, and the pressure that puts on parents and their ability to facilitate that. There was a big article in the LA Times today about a study they did regarding mostly Black and brown children in Los Angeles Unified who didn't check in at all and didn't turn in work. And there was a huge disparity across income level and neighborhoods. And so the divide around who was accessing the curriculum and who was having digital access problems and just who was being engaged became very clear. So although there's a huge relief that we may be safer in returning remotely in the beginning, there's then again this huge concern about who's not being served and how do we do that. And then I've got Orange County next to me that their very conservative school board, you know, recommended that they go back to school full time with no masks. So, and they're the elected school board, they're not the county office of education. So there's a real political divide in Orange County. But it's just been, this is what I've experienced in the last week. And I know, so I'm excited to hear from you all kind of what your experience has been. Emily's going to help me facilitate the conversation. I want to do a small breakout group, and just, I really invite you to use this space today as a conversation, and put your questions in the chat, or use, you know, raise your hand or just jump in, because I want to know what's been going on by you. How are you feeling? How are you responding? We just were at a conversation earlier, Emily and I, with some folks that lead this work, and they feel a lot of pressure. People are turning to them. One of them's a mental health professional, a psychologist, and, you know, everyone's like, well, what do we do? What should we do? You know, and she's like, I don't know. So I just wanted to offer that as a starting point, kind of what's been going through our minds. So I don't know what would be most helpful for all of you. Feel free to put suggestions in the chat. If you want to maybe put in what your local district is doing, if they know or if they don't know, and what they've decided to do if they do know. I'd be curious to hear that. Emily, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so so Patricia Marcos just was the first person to kind of chime in with that. And I know here in New Hampshire, there's no ultimate decision, but I think our local district is leaning towards, you know, having a sort of blended, you know, partially remote, partially in person come the fall, because our numbers are low right now. But, you know, I mean, as much as I think, you know, I think it's good to exchange information to kind of hear what other districts are doing, just because it can give us ideas. I think that to me, and this is my own personal experience with this, and I wonder if other folks are finding this as well, I'm struggling with feeling like I'm back in March. You know, it's kind of like we got through that and there was all that uncertainty, and then, you know, things started to open up, and, you know, school year was over, and now I'm like, oh God, we're going back, and we're back to we don't know. And, you know, even if you get to start back in person, there's no guarantees you're staying there. And that's true in any district across the country. So I think that we need to maybe do a little work today around holding space for that, just returning to what we don't know. Like, shit. Like, anybody else feeling that way? Like, really? We're back here again right now? Like, I'm not sure I have the resilience to go through this again. Like, this is not easy. So maybe Laura, we break out, and even if it's just we've got about 30 people here, we break out into 2 groups. You could lead a group and I could lead a group, or whatever. Or if people want to be in smaller groups, that's fine too. And give people a chance to kind of explore and hold space for that, for how they're feeling around. Here we go again.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start out. And we definitely have time for 2 different breakout sessions like we've done in the past. And I think you're right around this issue. That's a really good way to start. So Jenna, would you mind, it's either, how many are there? Maybe groups of like 5, 6, you know, small enough that they can really have a conversation. Yeah, maybe 5, and just explore kind of how you're feeling, where you're at, what your own resilience level is, what you're seeing around you, and just try to process that together. Does that sound like a good idea? Thumbs up, jazz hands, everybody with me? All right, so let's take, it's 12:15, let's take 10 minutes, 8 minutes-ish, with 5 people. and then we'll come back together and see where you're at. All right, Jenna.
Okay, everybody should be getting an invite now.
Hey, everyone. As we filter back in. I hope your groups were productive. Ours was. Emily, do you want to share anything?
Well, I'm sort of anticipating that some of what your group may have talked about was reflected in what our group discussed, which is just, um, you know, that people are worried, they're concerned. Any option, whatever that might be, leaves a lot of questions, leaves a lot of uncertainty still in play. I mean, even, one of the things that I think was a slightly different thread that someone mentioned was that there was a woman, Ruth, if she wants to speak for herself, but she was talking about, that in her particular circumstance, it's either her children can choose, they have to choose the beginning of the school year, either they're going to do 2 days virtual or they're going to do, 2 days in person in the school. And that leaves 3 days a week with, what are you doing if you're a working parent? Like, what are you going to do with your fourth grader? Is that kid going to be home all day by herself? Or, so there are some very legitimate childcare concerns that are surfacing, and no one's really talking about that because it's like, so just a lot of concern, a lot of shared concern, and a lot of shared worry. Yeah. What did you guys?
Yeah, I mean, my group was similar. Just a lot of, there's no good choices. Someone in my group mentioned, right? That, how are we supporting homeless students? How are we supporting kids with, significant IEPs? How are we, like I had brought up in the beginning, the lack of equity issues in terms of accessing school and the safety of everyone, the anxiety around all the adults in the building. Someone in my group brought up that 3 people in the custodial staff have COVID over the summer without people even being in the building. Right? Yeah. So I just think there's just a lot of anxiety and the roller coaster feelings that we're always trying to manage, both as parents and educators and community members, and caring, and just the concern that schools haven't historically done a good job of supporting teacher well-being in the past. I mean, Emily, and that's a lot of the work that we do, right? So right now it's even more important than ever to make sure that there's some kind of comprehensive wellness approach to how schools are working with their staff.
When we get to this point, I wanted to give, maybe there'll be other people that want to kind of chime in here, but I did see something, just so we don't stay in sucky town. That's what my former boss used to call it.
Right.
When we just swell down the drain and we're like, oh my God, life is just awful. There's no hope. I actually have some, a teacher in our local district posted this today, and it was sort of like a hybrid of hybrids. I thought it was a really simple and yet very practical plan that I want to share with folks. And just in case, I know some people don't have any say in these things, but I think it's important for us to remain somewhat hopeful, because things are still changing all the time. So even though they're going to say they're going to put these things in place, who knows? Stuff still can change. So, but are there other people here who might like to unmute themselves and chime in?
I'd love to hear from some other groups. Peggy? Jenna, can you unmute Peggy?
So one of the themes we talked about is this inequity. If I have a love with me, sorry. If we have kids that are, so our parents will be given a choice about virtual versus in person, and it's got the potential to exacerbate that haves and have-nots. And so the parent who is working at our grocery store and keeping it afloat can't afford to not have their kids in school, and they need them in that building. And the parent who's got potentially some money or friends can say, no, my kid's going to stay with this other mom, and there's going to be 5 kids, and we've got this covered. And then the schools, I don't know, I'm concerned about that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think it's a very valid. I don't know if other people want to chime in about what Peggy's describing. Ruth, do you want to speak to this directly? I see you chatting in, but since it's you that we're sorry for the lack of anonymity.
Carrie, do you want me to unmute you? I see she has her hand up.
Gary, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I really appreciated that there was a woman from Vermont in our group who was talking about the inequity of the students who are from lower income areas not having as strong an immune system as the people of means. I was saying that where I live, a neighbor of mine was saying that, you know, they're reasonably well off. They're going to keep their kids at home so that there's more space on the bus for the kids who don't have parents who can drive their kids to school. You know, they're work at home moms, and they can, you know, take turns setting up a little teaching co-op with each other. You know, they've got resources, and they said that that they were going to keep their kids home in part to make space for the kids who are in lower income situations. So they have a ride to get to school, and they have a place to go where they can be around people and, you know, get that safety net of school again. But then again, that means that, you know, the kids who are likely to have the weakest immune systems are all going to be thrown in there together. So, I mean, the inequity just goes on and on and on and on and on. And sorry about that, Emily, but there's a big old drain to circle here.
Right.
And I love you.
I know. No, I know. I'm just trying. Yeah, I know. I hear you totally. And I mean, so it makes me wonder too. I think Ruth wanted to chime in, but I was just going to say too, with what Carrie is saying, that makes me wonder, has anybody's district, and we don't have to answer this right this second, but has anybody's district actually gotten creative about that and said, you know, we're going to try to, you know, join with parents, you know, or offer that to parents, like, can we help you figure something out? I see Sherry's kind of shaking her head. I don't know if that's yes or no. But you know, I'd be curious if anybody, and if anybody's district or place is thinking creatively about these issues. But I didn't want to, Ruth probably said, I think Ruth wanted to be able to chime in there.
Yeah, Jenna, can you unmute her?
Yep, Ruth, I just unmuted you, so you should be able to now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I didn't really have a lot more to add, but I just wanted to let other people know that I had pasted a link to there was a webinar given by the UCSF Pediatric Health Center, and so there was a lot of information that I think helps to allay it helped me to allay some of the fears about lower elementary kids and younger kids. It doesn't apply as much for like 5th, 6th graders and up. Once you reach the age of 10, it seems like the viral load or whatever is higher, and so they're able to spread the virus more easily. But I think that the point about kids, and you know, they're already in poor health, and yet they also need to be the ones that are in most need of service. And so I think maybe one of you was going to point out that idea about having most people, most kids be served in an online setting, but then those who really need the services the most would be brought to the school building because like they don't have access to Wi-Fi and devices and nutrition and healthcare and all those things that they were getting previously at the school site. And so even though that would also put them at greater risk, I think it seems like there's kind of like this cost benefit thing, right? Of like or a risk benefit, not cost, risk benefit equation that families have to go through as they're, deliberating about whether it's worth the risk when the benefits could be greater for their children. So, but it does seem like if we're thinking about anyone, it should be those kids who are the most vulnerable.
Great.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura. You're gonna call on it.
Oh, no, I really appreciate that. And then thank you for sharing the link. I was hoping Ellen might be willing to chime in. She said she will, because, again, her point is great that we've been focusing on going back to normal, but instead of envisioning what it could look different. And that was the whole point of starting this, right? Is us envisioning a different, better way forward for education, which maybe can help us stop from, like pull ourselves out of the drain, like imagining how we might get unstuck from just thinking about forcing ourselves back to the normal that wasn't working for so many to begin with. And she said I could call on her. So Ellen.
So that was actually someone else in our group, I think maybe Rita,
okay,
who initially talked about that everybody's talking about going back, and that's probably not feasible at all. And so we talked about how this is really a perfect opportunity to weave social emotional learning and racial equity and some of the big topics that have come up over this period of time, as well as looking at what really has worked for kids and what hasn't worked for kids, and trying to integrate some new ideas because it's really time for an upgrade overall anyway. But it's really like, I'm afraid if we don't take the opportunity while it exists, then we might really be missing out.
Yeah. Oh, yes, so much resonates for me with that.
So can I was gonna, do folks mind if I share this? It's literally like a capture from Facebook. I was just gonna share this for a second if folks are okay with that. Because I thought it was, like I said, creative. So just give people a chance. This was one teacher's, let me just make sure that I have. Okay, so here's how it started, if you wanna read this. Everybody have a chance to read that, just so I can click to the next one. I'm a slow reader myself, so no pressure. Here's the next one. Because I saw some people mentioning the odds concept. And then, hold on, I'm just gonna, when people are done reading that, I'll scroll to the next thing. Is that, should I give people enough time with that one? I think there might be one more. There might be one more. Sorry. Yeah, no, that was it. That was it. I know, simplistic, but for some reason, any of the hybrid plans I've seen haven't really defined it quite like that. So I just thought that was worth sharing. I'm going to stop sharing.
That is interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so Adriana wanted to talk, and then Cheryl wants to share. Great. I love sharing.
Okay, so basically this goes back to when I was on the benefit on welfare. And the thing is, when I was on welfare, people sort of believed that because you were on welfare and vulnerable and poor, that you didn't have resources and you weren't able, you weren't intelligent and you weren't able to do much. But actually, there's a lot of people who are very qualified who are poor through no fault of their own. So you have to utilize that resource within the vulnerable population, and you have to just change your thinking a little bit and say, well, maybe if we empower them and just seed in within them, empower them to believe that they can actually teach their children and what they do is actually valuable, then you start getting them to hook into your virtual, that idea that lady said about, pods, everybody's virtual, gets the same consistent education, but how it's delivered is, like in pods and like in the school. But actually, if you do that and everybody's doing it remotely, there are people within the vulnerable community that could actually step up and do that. It's just that you have to find them and you have to give them empower them to do that. So that's another idea, because the pod idea is a very good idea. One set of learning remotely, going out to everyone so it's all consistent. That sounds a really good idea here. Thanks.
I love that. And thank you. I love that idea of empowering the community. Thank you, Adriana, for reminding us that, and using the resources that exist and really including people in meaningful ways and accessing the amazing brilliance that exists in the community. I love that. Thank you. Cheryl.
So we were talking a little bit about how we can make it a better normal and that we really have to work right now. Those of us that have the influence whatsoever, what happens in the schools when they to really start to focus on the safety and attachment and regulation, and try to get the point across that the learning and the competency, that window of tolerance is really going to be little with teachers and with students when they come back, and how to shift that thinking. And that it's helpful because it makes it more trauma informed. It's gonna, go leaps and bounds that way too. But that anybody that has an influence in that, I do training with different schools and Head Starts and things, and so I'm really trying to emphasize with them is that whole competency piece kind of needs to be on hold, because you've got to build that root system for the safety and connection, and then you got to be able to teach the regulation and do the regulation with them yourself as a teacher. And we talk about being able to make it more of a community, because if the teachers will be vulnerable and say, this is really hard for me too, this is really new for me too, it makes more of a community within the teacher and the student.
Yeah, that vulnerability piece for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that from your group. And Emily, you're all about the regulation and connection.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and that's the other thing I think is still a little bit discouraged about. Just gonna name it. That what I'm reading and seeing and understanding and hearing from folks is that, again, the priority for the districts often is still content over human need, and so that's a little disappointing to me as well. And I just think that any of us who can be vocal, wherever we can be vocal about the importance of prioritization for regulation and relationship building, it's, I mean, to me, that's the biggest threat, or danger, I guess, in our children being not in school. To me, that's the most damaging aspect of this, is that I don't know how you balance, you know, the virus with the very real human needs for children to be in, you know, contexts that cultivate play and relationship and regulation and all of that. And that's, you know, from you know, pre-K all the way through 12th grade. That's not just for our little kids. Our teens also need social proximity with peers. So that's and that's not something we can just go, well, that's kind of a nice thing. No, it's actually part and parcel of their mental health and their well-being. They need physical connectedness. So, or physical proximity, I guess that's the best way to put it. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to say much more about that, but.
Two great points in the chat. So, wow, Jessica, I'm surprised to hear that Nashville is saying that, and that's amazing.
That's awesome.
Hopefully, they're also providing. I think I know the answer to this, but hopefully they're supplying a lot of support for the teachers to know how to do that for 30 days. It's like, that's great. I'm excited to hear that, and I wish.
Maybe that's because Matthew's been down there, like, you know, playing that drum.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then I love. Oh, Jessica, that's your job.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You've got it. Then you've got it under control.
She actually has an awesome job. She was my group.
And then Judith, it's a good point. You know, we do. Judith pointed out that we're making the assumption that school is the main point of connection and socialization for a lot of kids. And you're right. I mean, I think we do fall into that. And it hasn't always been that way. That's a good point. It made me think for a second. So thank you.
Well, I think where we are, I don't know where you're at exactly, Judith, but I know for us, like where I am in rural New Hampshire, school is that, because we don't live in neighborhoods. So I guess a lot of times, like, the actual physical structure of your community has a big impact on whether or not children have access to other kids their age and peers. Yeah. And where I live, it's, you know, literally can be miles between homes and stuff. And so school is literally where my kids see their friends, unless I'm, you know, driving them all over the place to see friends. So that is where a lot of their social connections, but you're right, that's different in different places. And so maybe if you live in an urban area and you live in a neighborhood, then you just walk out your door and you got friends right there, or peers.
Yeah. I've been having an interesting conversation with my son. He's 16, who has been spending a lot of time playing video games in groups with his friends. And so for him, he's really happy, you know, and so he made me pause and question, is it my age? Is it my gender? Is it because I'm a, you know, 49-year-old woman, like, that I don't get it? But that socialization for him, and he's really happy to keep doing that. You know, for him, he feels like a lot of his social needs are being met that way. And so I really had to listen to him, because I was pushing him to figure out ways to, like, I did let him go fishing with a friend, you know, 6 feet apart or whatever, but like, I was really worried all the time about physical connection. And he was like, I'm really getting my needs met this other way. And so I'm just giving, you know, that's just one perspective that I hadn't thought about, because I don't get my connection that way, right? So I was only seeing it through my own lens. And his school I would say has done an amazing job of, when they were in school, of having kids do that via Zoom and all these different practices. And they seem to, and maybe because it is their generation and their age and the way that they do that frequently, he really liked it. And he said he felt connected to his school friends. So it gave me something else to think about.
I like what Adriana said about the library.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This has been very helpful. Just nice to know that we're not alone. There's a lot of the same shared anxieties. And I think this group always gives me new things to think about. You guys have brought up some really great creative solutions, and being able to share what, like, you know, Nashville's doing, or, you know, what it's like in a rural area, and, you know, just these different perspectives always help me grow, and feel connected to the larger community. Carrie. Jenna, I'll unmute you.
Yeah, I just had a thought about how maybe this could be captured in another way too, is that if we ask in ask the community, you know, what is your school system doing? How are you approaching it? You know, and just
on the ACES Connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on ACES Connection,
Yeah.
ask the community, and just get a really vigorous exchange going back and forth, and then ask the community about all of this. With Emily, you're posting the great things that the woman, the ACES and Education page would be great, or the homepage, because on ACES Connection, because I mean, my kids are grown. Thank you, dear God, that I don't have because
you don't have to live through this hell. Yeah.
Well, as the world's most paranoid mom, I would be so wrapped around the axle right now. I couldn't even type. I mean, but I love the win-wins that y'all are talking about, but, you know, but asking the whole 45,000 plus people who are members of ACES Connection to proffer up their plans, and who knows what kind of brilliant something might come out of the deal. So I love what the woman that you shared her tweets is doing, Emily. I think that was great. Yeah. Anyway, looking for the win-win.
Yep. Good point, Carrie. Thank you for reminding us about the Ask the Community page. I always get a lot of great feedback from that.
You know, I wonder too, I mean, I don't know if we've had that conversation. I don't know if you guys have had this conversation already, Lara, but I also think we've talked a bit about like equity, but I wonder if we could really dig into that more, maybe in a future session, because I think we need to think through what about some of these different ideas might do more to dismantle racism in our schools as opposed to perpetuate it. Because I mean, yes, this is like, you know, I'm just reflecting on the fact that I just said that we're living through hell, but at the same time, I do hold a lot of space for the fact that, yes, this is an opportunity to really reimagine stuff. It's not going quite as I had imagined it could go, you know, because there's just still a lot of, I mean, I would never dream for full virtual school. Like I just would never dream for that. But I just wonder if maybe we could dig into that a little bit, do a little framing around that, because that might be another thing we need to bring forward in our schools, or as we're, you know, moving forward, just being mindful about. Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that are happening related to these plans, and I think we're gonna continue to see this disparity grow if we're not much more intentional about that.
I think, Lisa, you have a good point, right? That because of this, right now we're in a space where this is at the forefront, and so we need to take advantage. And Janice, I hear you, right? So that those of us that are here, how do we get our voices heard with all these great ideas? And I think this is a good space to brainstorm some strategies in the future of how we might share what all of this amazing knowledge that keeps coming up. Carrie, I'll unmute you in just a sec. It is 1 o'clock. So while we're wrapping up, if you could do a short closing for me and just put one word in the chat of how today was for you, or a word that describes how you're feeling, that would be really helpful for us as feedback. Like I said, we're going to try to get the relentless school nurse, Robin Cogan. She'll be a guest coming up soon. And we're always looking for good suggestions. And I love, Emily, what you're saying about how to maybe dig in and frame that for an upcoming session. Absolutely. Carrie.
Well, one thing that would be interesting too, you know, I've written a lot about that group in Atlanta, Star C, that has taken trauma-informed housing and fused it with the schools near Atlanta that have traditionally not scored well. And because they've created these communities in these blighted apartment complexes that this friend of mine has a real estate company, and they've bought these things, they've stabilized the rents, they've put embedded in the community an after-school person who helps the kids with their homework and all that stuff. I'm really curious to see what Star C communities, how they're going to handle this if everybody's homeschooling, because the housing, the nexus of education and housing, you know, having the space to do this work in a home is huge. So it might be interesting to look at that, because the transportation is inequitable, the housing is inequitable, the internet is inequitable, the healthcare is inequitable. And so I love that you brought that up, Emily. And I know, Laura, that's always in your lens too, is so, I mean, it's really going to be shaking it up from the ground up, because there's inequity in so many areas. It just comes to school and kind of, that's the place where it comes to roost when it comes to school.
Yeah, good point, Carrie. And maybe you could do that as a little homework for me and find out what Star C is doing, and that they would be great guests to have on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's starting to really reimagine stuff.
Yeah. I mean, right now they have been really busting it to try to keep people from being evicted.
Yeah.
I mean, they just shifted their focus, and they got a bunch of money from a couple of counties to go in and help stabilize people from being chucked out, because dang, if what we think could happen with that happens, these kids, I mean, everything will change for them. And housing instability is the thing that trashes them at school more than any single other thing.
Yeah,
to not
absolutely.
have that continuity. So yeah, I'll get them. I'll look it up.
Okay.
We're in touch a lot. Thanks for letting me bust in.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Carrie works with me at ACES Connection. For those of you that don't know, she's an amazing colleague. So anyway, it is time, 1:03, and it's time to say goodbye until next week. And I hope that you all have a great week, and keep sharing, and we will be back next week. Thank you, Emily.
It's fun to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.